The morning sun peeked through the kitchen windows as Jenny stirred her coffee, watching her husband, Tom, pack his laptop for another day at the tech company where he worked. Their modern suburban home buzzed with the familiar rhythm of their morning routine: coffee brewing, toast popping, and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. "Don't forget we're having dinner with my parents tonight," Jenny reminded him, adjusting her blazer. She had recently been promoted to senior marketing manager at Anderson & Brooks, one of the city's top advertising firms. The promotion had come with a significant pay raise and new responsibilities, but also meant working directly under Robert Carter, the newly appointed head of marketing. Tom looked up from his bag, smiling at his wife of 8 years. He couldn't help but admire how put together she always looked, even at 7:30 in the morning. "I remember. I'll leave work early today," he said, walking over to kiss her goodbye. "Maybe we can finally tell them about the house renovations we've been planning." Their life together had fallen into a comfortable pattern over the years. They'd met during their college years. Tom was studying computer science while Jenny was pursuing her marketing degree. After graduation, they dated for 2 years before tying the knot in a beautiful garden ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Now, at 32, Tom had established himself as a respected software engineer, while Jenny's career in marketing had taken off, especially in the last few months. They'd worked hard to create the life they'd always dreamed of: the 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, regular weekend getaways, and enough savings to start thinking about having kids in the near future. "You've been putting in a lot of hours lately," Tom commented, noticing the slight dark circles under Jenny's eyes that her makeup couldn't quite hide. "Everything okay at work?" Jenny's hand paused briefly as she reached for her travel mug. "Oh, you know how it is with the new position. Mr. Carter has high expectations. He's very hands-on with his management style." She quickly changed the subject. "How's your new project going?" Tom launched into a story about his latest coding challenge, not noticing how Jenny's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she listened. Their morning continued as usual, sharing quick updates about their days ahead, making plans for the weekend, and discussing whether they should repaint the guest bedroom before Jenny's sister visited next month. As they headed out to their separate cars, they looked like the perfect couple to any passing neighbor: successful, happy, and completely in sync with each other's lives. Jenny's silver sedan pulled out of the driveway first, followed by Tom's blue hybrid. They'd chosen their vehicles together, practical choices that reflected their shared values and goals. What nobody could see was the slight tremor in Jenny's hands as she gripped her steering wheel, or the way she checked her phone 3 times before pulling out of the driveway. The screen showed an unread message from a number labeled simply as Mr. C. The message would go unopened until she reached her office parking lot, where she'd sit for an extra 5 minutes gathering her composure before walking into the building. To anyone watching, she was just another professional starting her workday. To her husband, she was living their shared dream of success and happiness. But underneath the polished surface of their perfect life, something was starting to crack. The promotion that should have been a stepping stone to greater things was becoming a weight around Jenny's neck, though she couldn't bring herself to tell Tom why. Not yet. As the morning traffic carried them in different directions, neither Tom nor Jenny realized that their carefully constructed world was about to be tested in ways they never imagined. The foundation of trust and communication they'd built over 8 years of marriage would soon face its greatest challenge, and the true strength of their relationship would be revealed in the most unexpected ways. The changes were subtle at first, like raindrops before a storm. Tom noticed how Jenny had stopped singing along to the radio during their Sunday morning cleaning sessions. Her phone would buzz during dinner, and she'd flip it face down without checking who it was. Small things, really, but they started to add up. "I might be late again tonight," Jenny said one morning, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup. "We've got that big client presentation coming up next week." It was the 3rd time that week she'd stayed late at the office, and it was only Wednesday. Tom watched as she absently stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking against the ceramic mug in an uneven rhythm. Her shoulders were tense, and she hadn't touched the banana muffin he'd picked up from her favorite bakery on his way home yesterday. "Hey," he said softly, reaching across their kitchen island to touch her hand. "When's the last time we had dinner together? Just us?" The moment he said it, he realized he couldn't remember either. Jenny's smile was quick but didn't reach her eyes. "I know, I'm sorry. Things are just intense right now. Mr. Carter wants everything perfect for this presentation. He keeps calling these last-minute meetings to review everything. That name again, Mr. Carter. Tom had noticed how Jenny's voice changed slightly whenever she mentioned her boss, a slight tension, almost imperceptible unless you'd known someone for nearly a decade. Later that week, Tom was working from home when Jenny's laptop chimed with a message. She'd left it open on the kitchen counter while grabbing something from the car. Tom wasn't trying to snoop. They'd always been open with each other, but the preview notification caught his eye. Looking forward to our private review session tonight. Don't keep me waiting like last time. The message disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Tom sat there, fingers hovering over his own keyboard, trying to make sense of what he'd just read. It was probably about work, he told himself. Just business. But something in his gut told him otherwise. That evening, he noticed Jenny's hands trembling slightly as she applied her makeup. She changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a high-necked blouse she rarely wore. The office gets cold during these late meetings, she explained, though Tom couldn't remember her ever saying that before. Their quick goodbye kiss felt different too. Jenny seemed distracted, already somewhere else in her mind. As she grabbed her keys, Tom noticed she'd barely touched her dinner again. The next few days brought more changes. Jenny started taking her phone with her even for quick trips to the mailbox. She jumped slightly when Tom came up behind her to hug her, something that had never happened before. Their easy conversations about work had become brief and vague. One Saturday morning, Tom woke up early and found Jenny sitting in the dark kitchen, still in her pajamas, staring at her phone. When she noticed him, she quickly locked the screen, but not before he caught a glimpse of what looked like a text conversation. "Everything okay?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Just checking some work emails," she replied, but her voice had that slight tremor he'd begun to recognize. Tom started paying more attention to the little things. He noticed how Jenny would tense up when her phone buzzed during their reg dinners together, how she'd started making excuses to skip their Sunday brunches with friends, the way she'd zone out during conversations, her mind clearly somewhere else. The final straw came when he overheard her on the phone in their home office, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone he'd never heard before. "I can't. Not tonight. My husband, no, please understand. I know the presentation is important, but..." There was a long pause, and Tom could hear the muffled sound of a male voice on the other end. Jenny's next words were so quiet he almost missed them. "Okay, yes, I'll figure something out. Just, please." When she emerged from the office, her face was pale, and she wouldn't meet his eyes. "That was Mr. Carter," she said before he could ask. "I need to go in tonight to prepare for tomorrow's client meeting." Tom watched as she gathered her things, her movements jerky and rushed. The woman rushing out the door barely resembled the confident, happy person he'd married. Something was very wrong, and he couldn't ignore it anymore. As her car pulled out of the driveway, Tom sat down at their kitchen counter, opened his laptop, and began to type. It was time to start documenting everything he'd noticed. Every late meeting, every strange text, every subtle change in his wife's behavior. He couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger than work stress was happening at Anderson and Brooks, and he needed to figure out what it was before it destroyed the woman he loved. The truth came to light on a rainy Tuesday evening. Tom had been sitting at his desk, trying to focus on coding when Jenny's laptop chimed with an incoming email. She was in the shower, getting ready for another late meeting at the office. The notification preview appeared briefly on her screen, and what Tom saw made his blood run cold. "Delete these messages after reading. Remember our agreement about keeping things professional at the office tomorrow." "Wasi." Tom's hands shook as he walked over to Jenny's laptop. They'd always known each other's passwords, a sign of trust in their marriage. He hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the keyboard. Was he really going to do this? But then he remembered Jenny's trembling hands, her lost appetite, the fear in her eyes whenever her phone buzzed. He logged in. The email was still open, and below it was a chain of messages that made Tom's stomach turn. Mr. Carter's professional comments became increasingly inappropriate over time. There were demands for private meetings, thinly veiled threats about Jenny's job security, comments about her appearance. "Wear that blue dress tomorrow. It suits you. Our little secret stays between us, right?" Would be a shame if the client heard about that mistake in the report. Tom kept reading, his hands clenched into fists. The messages revealed a pattern of manipulation that had been building for months. Mr. Carter had started small: extra work assignments, late-night meetings, supple compliments. Then came the touching, a hand on Jenny's shoulder that lingered too long, standing too close during presentations, brushing against her in the hallway. Jenny's responses showed her discomfort clearly. "Please keep our interactions professional. I'm not comfortable with these comments. I'd prefer to meet in the conference room, not your office." But Mr. Carter's replies grew more insistent. "Don't be so uptight. I'm just being friendly. Remember who approved your promotion. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings about your performance review." Tom found a folder of screenshots Jenny had been saving. Photos of inappropriate text messages, emails with veiled threats, calendar invites for unnecessary private meetings. She'd been documenting everything but was too scared to come forward. The shower water stopped running upstairs. Tom quickly closed the laptop, his mind racing. He walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water, and waited. He could hear Jenny's footsteps as she got dressed, the familiar sound of her makeup bag zipping closed, the soft pad of her feet on the stairs. When she entered the kitchen, she froze at the sight of his face. "Tom? What's wrong?" He pushed one of the water glasses toward her. "Sit down, honey. We need to talk." Jenny's face went pale. I have a meeting." "No," Tom said gently. "No more meetings. I know about Mr. Carter." The glass slipped from Jenny's hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. She didn't even seem to notice the water soaking into her shoes. You know. "I saw the emails, the texts, everything." Tom stood up slowly, careful not to spook her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jenny's legs gave out, and she sank into a kitchen chair. The dam broke, and everything came pouring out. How it had started with small comments, escalated to uncomfortable touches, then turned into outright harassment. How Mr. Carter had implied her job and career would be over if she reported him. How he'd started hinting that he knew where she lived, that he'd seen Tom leaving for work in the mornings. "I was so scared," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Not just for my job, but for us. He said he'd make sure no one in the industry would ever hire me again. That he'd tell everyone I'd been sleeping with him to get promoted. I didn't know what to do." Tom knelt beside her chair, taking her trembling hands in his. "Listen to me. You're not alone anymore. We're going to fight this together." "How?" Jenny's voice was small, broken. "It's his word against mine. He's friends with everyone in upper management." Tom squeezed her hands. "You've been smarter than he realized. Those screenshots you've been saving, the documented timeline of events, that's evidence. And I bet you're not the only one he's done this to." As they sat in their kitchen, surrounded by broken glass and spilled water, a plan began to form. They would do this right, through proper channels, with documentation, with legal help. Mr. Carter had picked the wrong woman to harass and the wrong family to threaten. Tom pulled out his phone and started making calls, first to a lawyer specializing in workplace harassment, then to their close friend who worked in HR at another company for advice. Jenny sat beside him, her breathing steadying as she realized she finally had someone in her corner. The late meeting went unattended that night. Instead, husband and wife sat at their kitchen table until dawn, building their case piece by piece. The truth was out now, and with it came not just fear, but also relief, determination, and hope. The next phase of their fight was about to begin. The next morning, Tom and Jenny sat in their car outside the law office, 15 minutes early for their appointment. Jenny kept smoothing her skirt, a nervous habit she'd developed over the past few months. Tom reached over and took her hand. "Remember what we talked about," he said softly. "We're just here to understand our options, one step at a time." The lawyer's office was warm and welcoming, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. Lisa Chen, their attorney, listened carefully as Jenny shared her story, her experienced eyes taking in every detail as she made notes. "You did the right thing by documenting everything," Lisa said, reviewing the screenshots and emails they brought. "And you were smart to save them outside your work computer. Many people don't think of that." As they talked, Lisa's expression grew more determined. "What concerns me most is the pattern here. These aren't random incidents. They're calculated moves by someone who knows exactly what he's doing. Jenny's voice was quiet but steady. Do you think there might be others? Lisa looked up from her notes. In my experience, people who abuse their power rarely stop at one victim. Would you be comfortable if I made some discreet inquiries? That afternoon back at home, Tom set up a secure email account and started organizing their evidence chronologically. Jenny sat beside him, adding details she remembered about each incident, dates, times, who else was in the office, what exactly was said. There was something else, Jenny said suddenly, her hands pausing over the keyboard. Last month, when Lucy from accounting suddenly quit, she'd been called into Mr. Carter's office the day before. Tom made a note. We should try to contact her. The next few days were a blur of activity. Lisa's discreet inquiries began bearing fruit. First came an email from Patricia, a former marketing coordinator who'd left 6 months ago. Then another from Michelle in client relations. Each had their own story, their own screenshots, their own reasons for staying quiet. He told me no one would believe me, Patricia wrote. Said it would be career suicide to speak up. Michelle's story was similar. He made it clear that he could either help my career or destroy it. I chose to transfer to another branch instead. Tom and Jenny created a secure group chat where the women could share their experiences safely. More stories emerged. A pattern became clear. Mr. Carter targeted women who were talented and ambitious, using their career goals as leverage to keep them quiet. Look at this, Tom said one evening, pointing to his screen. He'd created a timeline showing when each woman had started working under Mr. Carter, when the harassment began, and what form it took. The pattern was undeniable. Jenny leaned over his shoulder reading. He always started the same way. Small comments, then unnecessary meetings, then the touching, Tom finished, his jaw tight. And always the threats about their careers. They'd work late into the night, organizing statements, screenshots, and emails. Lisa had helped them connect with Karen from HR at a partner company who provided guidance on proper reporting procedures without tipping off anyone at Anderson and Brooks. The key, Karen explained during a video call, is to present such overwhelming evidence that they can't sweep it under the rug. They need to see this isn't just one incident or one misunderstanding. It's a pattern of deliberate harassment. The group chat became a source of strength. Women who'd felt alone and powerless found solidarity in their shared experiences. They shared coping strategies, offered emotional support, and helped each other fill in gaps in the timeline. I should have spoken up sooner, Jenny said one night as they reviewed another former employee's statement. Maybe if I had. Tom stopped typing and turned to face his wife. Hey, look at me. You're speaking up now. We all handle trauma differently. What matters is that you're doing something about it now, and you're helping others find their voice too. As their case grew stronger, they knew they were approaching a turning point. Lisa advised them that they had enough evidence to approach the company's senior management and board of directors. The documentation was thorough, the pattern was clear, and most importantly, they weren't alone anymore. Remember, Lisa said during their final preparation meeting, strength in numbers isn't just about having multiple victims. It's about showing that each victim has multiple pieces of evidence, multiple witnesses, and multiple instances of harassment. Mr. Carter is counting on everyone being too scared to connect the dots, but we've connected them all. That night, Tom found Jenny standing in their home office, looking at the evidence wall they'd created. Sticky notes, timeline printouts, and witness statements covered the surface, each piece adding to their case. Are you ready for tomorrow? He asked, standing beside her. Jenny took a deep breath, her eyes moving from one piece of evidence to another. You know what? I am. For the first time in months, I'm not afraid anymore. We have the truth on our side, and we have proof. It's time to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Tom wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they stood together, looking at the wall that represented weeks of careful documentation and countless brave women stepping forward. Tomorrow, they would take their evidence to the company's board. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a mix of tension and determination. Tom and Jenny's kitchen was filled with the smell of coffee as their support team gathered for a final review. Lisa, their lawyer, spread documents across the dining table while Karen from HR checked their presentation one last time. Remember, Lisa said, adjusting her glasses, let me do most of the talking at first. The company's lawyers will be there, and we need to establish the legal grounds right away. Jenny nodded, clutching her coffee mug. She was wearing her favorite navy blue suit, not because Mr. Carter preferred it, but because it made her feel strong. What if they tried to dismiss it as a misunderstanding? That's why we have this, Karen said, pulling up a PowerPoint slide. 15 separate incidents, documented with timestamps, 28 inappropriate messages, 12 witnesses, 5 former employees with similar experiences. They can't dismiss all of this. Tom watched his wife's face as she reviewed the evidence one last time. The fear that had haunted her eyes for months was replaced by something else now: determination. The Anderson and Brooks corporate headquarters looked different today. The familiar lobby felt colder, more imposing. As they walked to the conference room, Jenny spotted some of her co-workers. A few avoided eye contact, but others gave subtle nods of support. The boardroom was already half full when they arrived. Executive team members sat on one side, their faces carefully neutral. The company's legal team occupied one corner, laptops open and ready. Mr. Carter wasn't there yet. Good morning, everyone, Lisa began, her voice clear and professional. We're here today to address a serious pattern of workplace harassment and abuse of power. The room grew silent as Lisa launched into their presentation. Slides appeared on the screen showing timeline after timeline. Messages, dates, witness statements. The evidence was overwhelming. Halfway through the presentation, the door opened. Mr. Carter walked in, his usual confident smile freezing when he saw the content on the screen. His eyes darted to Jenny, then to the lawyers, then to the board members. What is this? He demanded, but the board chairman held up a hand. Mr. Carter, please take a seat. We're in the middle of a very serious presentation. For the next hour, the story unfolded. Not just Jenny's story, but the stories of all the women who had suffered under Mr. Carter's abuse of power. Karen presented HR statistics showing an unusual pattern of female employees transferring or resigning from departments under his control. Then came the video testimonies. Former employees speaking directly to the camera, sharing their experiences. The board members' expressions grew darker with each account. This isn't just about harassment, Lisa explained. This is about creating a hostile work environment, abuse of power, and potential legal liability for the company. Mr. Carter tried to interrupt several times, but his protests sounded hollow against the weight of evidence. His usual smooth confidence was cracking. These are baseless accusations, he finally sputtered. They're trying to destroy my reputation. That's when Jenny stood up. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. No, Mr. Carter. You did that yourself. Every time you used your position to harass and intimidate women. Every time you threatened our careers. Every time you made us feel unsafe in our workplace. The board chairman's voice was grave. Mr. Carter, please wait outside while we discuss this matter. The next 2 hours were intense. The company's lawyers huddled with the board members, reviewing the evidence. HR representatives were called in. More questions were asked. Jenny answered each one clearly, supported by their thorough documentation. Finally, the chairman spoke. Mrs. Thompson, we want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. The board takes these allegations extremely seriously. He turned to the company's head of HR. Effective immediately, Mr. Carter is suspended pending a full investigation. We'll be hiring an external firm to conduct an independent review. Jenny felt Tom's hand squeeze hers under the table. It wasn't over yet, but it was a start. As they left the building that afternoon, other women from the office approached Jenny. Some had tears in their eyes. Others just wanted to say thank you. One young intern hugged her, whispering, "You made me feel safe to stay." In the car ride home, Jenny was quiet, processing everything. "Do you think it made a difference?" she finally asked. Tom glanced at her, remembering how broken she'd seemed just weeks ago. "Look at your phone," he said softly. Jenny checked it. The support group chat was buzzing with messages. More women were coming forward, sharing their stories. The wall of silence was crumbling. "It's already made a difference," Tom said. "And this is just the beginning." That evening, as they sat on their back porch watching the sunset, Jenny received an email from the board. The external investigation would start tomorrow. They wanted to interview everyone who had experienced or witnessed harassment. Real change was coming. "I'm proud of you," Tom said, bringing her a cup of tea. "You know that, right?" Jenny smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in months. "I couldn't have done it without you, without any of you." Inside, their dining room table was still covered with evidence and documents. But now these papers represented not just pain and fear, but strength and hope. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The external investigation team arrived at Anderson and Brooks on a Monday morning. They set up in a conference room on the third floor, away from the regular office bustle. For the next 2 weeks, a steady stream of employees made their way to that room, each carrying their own piece of the story. Jenny watched from her desk as Claire from design walked toward the conference room, clutching a folder to her chest. They exchanged knowing looks. Yesterday it had been Rita from accounting. Tomorrow it would be someone else. The truth was spreading like ripples in a pond. Tom called during her lunch break. "How are you holding up?" "It's strange," Jenny said, sitting in her car to have some privacy. "The office feels different now. People are talking more openly. This morning, I overheard 2 interns discussing what makes a workplace interaction inappropriate. They were actually using terms like consent and power dynamics." The investigation team was thorough. They didn't just interview current employees. They reached out to former staff members, clients, even cleaning crews who worked evening shifts. Every day brought new revelations. "Did you hear?" Linda from reception whispered to Jenny one morning. They found old complaint letters in the HR files. Letters that somehow never made it to the review committee. The investigation's scope kept expanding. It wasn't just about Mr. Carter anymore. The team was looking into why previous complaints had been ignored, who had helped sweep things under the rug, and what systems had failed to protect employees. One afternoon, Jenny was called back to the conference room. The lead investigator, a woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair, had more questions. "We've been looking into the promotion patterns," she explained, showing Jenny a spreadsheet. "Notice anything about these dates?" Jenny leaned forward. The spreadsheet showed years of hiring and promotion data. A pattern emerged. Talented women would rise quickly, then suddenly transfer, resign, or accept lateral moves to other departments. All after working closely with Mr. Carter. "I thought I was alone," Jenny said softly. "I had no idea it went back this far." "That's exactly what he counted on," the investigator replied. "Isolation is a powerful tool, but not as powerful as women supporting each other." Back at her desk, Jenny noticed small changes around the office. HR had put up new posters about workplace harassment policies. The company email system now had a direct link for reporting inappropriate behavior. The break room buzzed with conversations about respect and professional boundaries. Tom noticed changes at home too. Jenny was sleeping better. She'd started humming again while cooking. Her smile reached her eyes more often. One evening, he found her writing in a notebook. "What's that?" he asked. "Ideas," she replied. The investigation team asked for suggestions on improving workplace safety. "I've been thinking about training programs, mentorship opportunities, ways to make it easier for people to speak up." The investigation's findings landed like a thunderbolt. Mr. Carter's behavior was deemed pervasive and systematic. But more than that, the report highlighted systemic failures that had allowed his behavior to continue for years. The board called an all-staff meeting. The chairman's voice was grave as he addressed the packed conference room. "The investigation has revealed serious failures at multiple levels," he began. "Failures in leadership, in oversight, and in our responsibility to protect our employees. That changes today." The changes came swiftly. Mr. Carter was terminated, effective immediately. 2 HR managers who had ignored complaints were asked to resign. The company announced mandatory training programs, new reporting systems, and an independent ethics committee. But the most significant change was in the office atmosphere. People stood taller, spoke more freely. Younger employees asked questions about boundaries and appropriate behavior without fear. "You've started something," Tom said one evening as they walked through their neighborhood. "Something bigger than just stopping one person." Jenny nodded, thinking about all the women who had come forward, all the stories shared, all the changes happening. "We started it together. All of us." That night, Jenny received an email from a junior designer. "I've been offered a promotion to the creative team. Last month, I might have been scared to take it, but now, thanks to you and everyone who spoke up, I know I'll be safe. I know I'll be heard. Thank you for showing us that we don't have to accept things the way they are." Jenny showed the email to Tom, tears in her eyes. "This is why we did it," she said, "not just to stop something bad, but to create something good." The investigation was coming to a close, but its impact would ripple through Anderson and Brooks for years to come. New policies were being written, training programs developed, support systems established. The wall of silence had been replaced by open doors and willing listeners. As Jenny prepared for bed that night, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by something stronger: purpose. She and Tom had fought for more than just justice. They had fought for change, for safety, for the right of every person to work without fear. And they had won. 1 year later, the entrance to Anderson and Brooks looked different. New signs in the lobby highlighted the company's commitment to workplace safety. The receptionist's desk displayed brochures about employee rights. But the biggest changes weren't visible on the surface. Jenny stood at the front of the training room, looking at the faces of new employees during their orientation. "Your safety and dignity at work isn't just a policy," she told them. "It's a right. And we all play a part in protecting it." After the investigation, the board had created a new position: Director of Workplace Culture and Safety. They'd offered it to Jenny. At first, she'd hesitated, but Tom had encouraged her. "Think about it," he'd said. "Who better to build a safer workplace than someone who fought to make it safer?" Now, she spent her days making sure no one would ever feel as alone and scared as she once had. The support group they'd created during the investigation had evolved into a formal mentorship program. Women who had once been afraid to speak up now serve as mentors to new employees. "Any questions?" Jenny asked the orientation group. A young intern raised her hand. "What if we're not sure if something is inappropriate?" "That's exactly the kind of question we want you to ask," Jenny replied. "Let me show you our new reporting system." The system was simple but effective. Employees could report concerns anonymously through an app. Each report was reviewed by an independent committee. No single person could dismiss a complaint, and every report was tracked until resolution. Later that afternoon, Jenny met with her team to review their quarterly statistics. Reports of harassment had initially spiked after the new system was implemented, not because there were more incidents, but because people felt safer reporting them. Now, the numbers were dropping steadily. "Look at this," her assistant pointed out. 98% of employees say they know how to report inappropriate behavior. Last year, it was only 40%. Tom noticed the changes in Jenny too. The confidence that Mr. Carter had tried to crush had returned stronger than ever. She spoke at industry conferences about creating safer workplaces. Other companies started calling, asking for advice on implementing similar programs. One evening, as they walked through their neighborhood, Jenny's phone buzzed with a news alert. Mr. Carter had tried to get a job at another company, but their background check had revealed his history. "The system works," Tom said, squeezing her hand. "It's not just the system," Jenny replied. "It's the people. Remember Linda from reception? Yesterday, she spotted a manager acting too friendly with an intern. Instead of staying quiet, she reported it immediately. The old culture of silence is gone." They reached their favorite coffee shop, where they'd had their first date years ago. Inside, Jenny spotted 2 women from her office having an animated discussion about a new project. They weren't huddled in a corner speaking in whispers. They were confident, professional, unafraid. "Sometimes I think about that night," Jenny said as they ordered their usual drinks. "When you found those messages and confronted me. I was so scared then." Tom remembered too. The broken glass on the kitchen floor. The tears. The fear. "You were stronger than you knew." "We were stronger together," Jenny corrected him. "All of us. Every person who spoke up, who shared their story, who refused to let fear win." That evening, they hosted a dinner party. Their guests included women from the original support group, now friends and colleagues. The conversation flowed freely, filled with laughter and plans for the future. "Remember our first meeting?" one woman asked. "We were all so nervous. Now look at us." They talked about the changes they'd seen. How the younger employees no longer accepted inappropriate behavior as just part of the job. How managers attended mandatory respect and boundaries training without complaint. How the board had appointed 2 women as directors after years of all-male leadership. It's like dominoes, another woman said. One person speaks up, then another, and suddenly the whole culture changes. After their guests left, Jenny and Tom sat on their back porch, sharing a quiet moment under the stars. A text message lit up Jenny's phone. Another company requesting her help with their workplace policies. "You know what makes me happiest?" Jenny said, looking at the message. "It's not just about stopping bad things from happening anymore. It's about creating good things, building something better." Tom nodded, remembering how far they'd come, one story at a time. Inside their home office, the wall that had once held evidence of harassment now displayed something different. Thank you notes from employees, pictures of mentorship gatherings, certificates from training programs Jenny had developed. The pain of the past had been transformed into tools for change. "We should write a book," Jenny mused. "Not just about what happened, but about how to make workplaces safer. Real stories, real solutions." "You should," Tom agreed. "Your story has already changed one company. Imagine how many more it could help." As they headed to bed that night, Jenny paused in the hallway, looking at a photo from their wedding day. She remembered the young, hopeful couple they'd been and the stronger partnership they'd become through facing adversity together. "Thank you," she said softly to Tom, "for believing me, supporting me, fighting beside me." "Always," he replied, pulling her close. "That's what love is." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, other women were finding their voices, other couples were facing challenges together, other workplaces were learning to change. The ripples of their story continued to spread, touching lives they would never know. And that was the real victory, not just justice served, but hope restored, dignity reclaimed, and a future made safer for everyone who would follow.